This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello and welcome. It's Thursday, January 13th, and this is Orlando Sentinel Now. Today, we're discussing U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz' ex-girlfriend standing before an Orlando grand jury, plus how new oversight might be coming in to Florida tax collectors. I'm your host, Joe Mario Pedersen, and joining me today, I have Justice and Public Safety Editor Jeff Weiner and Seminole County reporter Martin Comas. Thank you both so much for being here today. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Jeff, I want to come to you first for one of your latest, accompanied by fellow reporter Annie Martin here. Matt Gaetz' ex-girlfriend testifying before grand jury in Orlando. Now, this being part of a long-running investigation that we've heard about Matt Gaetz. But yesterday, over with this grand jury, Jeff, so far, what have we learned?
Not much. The grand jury process is secretive. Obviously, they meet in secret. The testimony is non-public. It all occurs behind closed doors. Basically, the confirmation that she was even testifying came from CNN and NBC, a couple of news outlets that witnessed her entering the courthouse in downtown Orlando with her attorney. Not going to learn what she testified to specifically, but from what has been widely reported, this is a very important witness in the potential case against Matt Gaetz. This is somebody who could testify to whether or not he had sex with the 17-year-old girl who Joel Greenberg, the former Seminole County tax collector, and his friend has admitted to having had sex with. And this is also potentially somebody who could testify about a trip to the Bahamas that occurred a couple of years ago that included Matt Gaetz, former state representative Halsey Beshears, an Orlando doctor named Jason Pirozzolo that has come under investigation by federal authorities for potential violations of the Mann Act, which is a law that prohibits bringing people across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. According to reports, there may have been escorts on that trip. So this is a witness who could potentially be very damning for Matt Gaetz. An ex-girlfriend of his, somebody who used to be, according to reports, a congressional staffer. So her participation in this even is a very bad sign because it suggests that she is cooperating with federal authorities, which had not always been a certainty. So definitely an ominous sign for the congressman, not only for her to be testifying, but for there to be a grand jury meeting to consider his case at all.
Absolutely. As you said, Jeff, not a whole lot that we got to learn yesterday. But before moving forward here, Jeff, just a real quick question. Is there any indication of when we might learn more about this investigation?
There is kind of a looming deadline here, which is that in March, Joel Greenberg is slated to be sentenced. And a judge has said that sentencing date, which had been delayed a couple of times, will not be delayed again. He's going to be sentenced in March. Now, we know that Joel Greenberg is cooperating with federal authorities. That was a big part of the plea agreement that he signed when he pleaded guilty to 6 federal crimes, including sex trafficking last year. And we know that Matt Gaetz, by all reports, is one of the main targets of that investigation. So typically with this kind of a scenario, by the time that Joel Greenberg is sentenced, the federal government is going to want to be able to say pretty definitively how helpful he has been to them. And a big factor in that is whether his cooperation with the feds leads to other indictments. So I think that, while we can't say for sure, that it's reasonable to expect that we should get some kind of resolution to this Gaetz matter in or around the time frame that Joel Greenberg is going to be sentenced. We should have some concept, or at least the federal authorities should have some concept as to whether Greenberg has given them enough to potentially charge Gaetz or other people in connection with this sex trafficking investigation that they've embarked upon. So, March is the big day to watch, but we might start to see other indictments spill out in the time in between now and then, not just potentially of Gaetz, but of other Joel Greenberg associates, whether it's people he employed at the tax office, whether it's people who were involved in the COVID relief fraud scheme that he was involved in. Obviously Greenberg has admitted to a wide array of crimes, and potentially anyone involved in those crimes is in jeopardy over the next few months.
While on the subject of Joel Greenberg, I want to pivot now over to Martin Comas for one of your latest, Martin, coming out here. A bill would let counties object to tax collectors spending after the Greenberg debacle. Now, as Jeff had mentioned, Greenberg had been investigated as his time as the tax collector in a 3-year period and was found to be embezzling thousands of dollars as well as doling out millions of dollars to friends. Now, Martin, what would these bills potentially do?
Well, in Florida, in all of Florida's 67 counties, the tax collectors' budgets are approved by the state's Department of Revenue. And that's kind of an unusual arrangement, or kind of an interesting arrangement, because tax collectors, as you know, are elected by the counties, countywide, by the residents of that county. However, the county commissions or no local officials have oversight or can't even question or do anything with the budgets of the tax collector's office. And as I said, those are reviewed by the Department of Revenue between August 1st and September 29th every year. So two legislators have filed companion bills, identical bills. State Senator Jason Broders, a Republican from Sanford, and Joy Goff Marcel, who is a state representative Democrat from Maitland. So these are bipartisan. And they both filed these identical bills that would give not just Seminole County, but any of the counties in Florida, 67 counties, their county commissions, the authority to make comments, to review the tax collectors' budgets, and send those comments up to Tallahassee and up to the Department of Revenue. And then the Department of Revenue would have to be required to respond to those comments in writing. Now, the reason why this is important is that when Joe Greenberg was first sworn into office back in January 2017, the first budget that he submitted was just very much different, and the spending in it was just very much different than his predecessor's budget, Ray Valdez. And so what happened was these county commissioners were questioning and said, hey, they were asking Joe Greenberg, why is your budget so different? Why are you hiring consultants? He was also planning to do this risky real estate scheme. And Joe Greenberg was pretty blunt to the county commission back in 2017. He said, I don't need to seek your approval. By Florida law, I don't have any, I don't even have to present my budget to the Seminole County Commission. And that's true. And so that's a problem, or that's a complaint that Seminole County commissioners have long had. It's just that, we need to have some local eyes on the tax collector's budget, because we already approve, county commissions in Florida already approved the sheriff's budget. They already approved the supervisor of elections budgets. They also approved the clerk of the courts budget, but they have no authority or anything or no oversight at all over the tax collector's budgets.
Easy to see why they would believe that this might be the next necessary step in making sure that something like this didn't happen again. But Martin, I want to ask you about Greenberg's successor, who you heard from, J.R. Kroll, and his feelings on these potential bills. What did he say?
Well, he's not completely opposed to these bills, which eventually would be combined in the legislature if it does move forward, and then be one bill and then be sent to the governor if it does pass the legislature this session. But J.R. Kroll is not completely against this bill. However, he does have mixed feelings. He feels that this bill just doesn't really have very much teeth. And the county can already, just like any one of us, any resident at all, through Florida Public Records, can request, a tax collector's budget and can request their expenditures. And so the county commission already has that through a different avenue. So he's not completely opposed to it, but he does say, this is probably not the right way to go. What he is doing, though, and what J.R. Kroll did do as soon as he took office, was on his website, he does post his budget, his office's budget, and he also, every quarter, every 3 months, he posts a whole list of all of his expenditures and all his income on there. So anybody can just go on to the Seminole County Tax Collector's Office's website, and down toward the bottom, you can see, his budget, and you can see his expenses and revenues over the past 3 months.
Certainly more to come out on that story, and we'll update you as we learn more. Before we sign off today, we do want to talk about Thursday's weather, presented by Premier Sotheby's International Realty. You can't retire those jackets and sweaters just yet, as the cold wave hitting Orlando isn't leaving any time in the next 5-day forecast. A front is crossing over Florida today, but it's not expected to impact Central Florida much, with the skies being mostly clear and only a small chance of rain present. Average peak temperatures in January are 71. Orlando will have a peak slightly lower than that at 70 degrees today. The low is forecast at 54. After that, temperatures will be dipping into colder territory, with temperature lows in the mid to high 40s throughout the weekend. So be on the lookout for that. And if you're looking for more information on weekend's weather, you can, of course, find out more at OrlandoSentinel.com, where you get caught up with the stories that we talked about here today as well. For those of you who subscribe to the Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for supporting work like this and supporting local journalism. If you want to become a supporter, it's easy to do so. All you need to do is visit orlandosentinel.com/subscribe. But as for OSN, that will do it for us today. A big thank you to Jeff and to Martin for keeping us caught up in what's going on in our community. We'll be back again with more news tomorrow at noon. We'll see you then. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on orlandosentinel.com.